Good morning. Thank you so much for joining me on today's Wednesday webinar. Today we are going to be discussing Social Security disability for epilepsy. To get started, we're going to talk a little bit about Social Security disability basics, give you kind of an understanding of how the program works, and then a little bit of guidance and consideration from the administration specifically focused on epilepsy claims. We will talk about potential listing 1102, talk about some additional considerations, and then of course I close all of my Wednesday webinars by talking about how an attorney can help you with your Social Security disability claim. A little bit about me. My name is Kaitlin Wildoner. I'm the founding attorney of Beacon Disability PLLC, which is a law firm based in Florida. We assist clients throughout the country with their Social Security disability and supplemental security income cases. If we can't help you, we try to connect you with somebody who can. If you are watching this live, please do not put any identifying information in the chat. If you are watching it on the replay, please, the same thing goes. If you have questions, at the end of the webinar will be our contact information, including a phone number and an email address. If you are watching it live, we will also go ahead and put into the chat a link that you can click and schedule a phone call with us. And then on the replay, there will also be a copy of the link down below in the description. So go ahead and click that link, send us an email, give us a call, and that way we can kind of understand your situation and see what we can do to help you. Getting into Social Security disability basics, there are two different Social Security disability programs. The first is SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance, and the second program is Supplemental Security Income, or SSI. Both programs require that you be found disabled and unable to work for a period of at least 12 months by the Social Security Administration. Where they differ is on a second prong. And with SSDI, you have to have sufficient work credits. Generally speaking, that means you have to have worked for 5 of the last 10 years. There are exceptions to that rule. If you have not worked 5 of the last 10 years, that's a question. Feel free to call, email, schedule a time to chat. We'll see if you might still qualify. The other program, SSI, does not have a work history requirement, but it does have income and asset restrictions. Again, generally speaking, you cannot have more than $2,000 in assets if you're single, $3,000 in assets if you're married, and still qualify for SSI. There are also income restrictions. If you are receiving any in-kind income, that all kind of comes into play, and those are more specific questions. With respect to the income and assets with SSI, that's actually a better question for Social Security themselves, because they will be able to put all of your information into kind of their calculator and understand where you're coming from to see if you cross that threshold for them to even look at your medical. If you don't meet those additional prongs with SSDI, the work credits, or SSI, having a below a certain number of income and assets, the agency doesn't even get to the medical component of your claim. So kind of leading into that here, there's a 5-step evaluation process. When you file your claim, the very first thing they do, step 0, is under SSDI, make sure you meet that work history requirement. And under SSI, they'll take a look at income and assets and see if you would qualify. But then when they turn to the medical component, the very first thing they're going to look at is, are you engaging in substantial gainful activity? And right now in 2022, as this webinar is being recorded, substantial gainful activity is working more than 20 hours a week or earning more than $1,350 a month in gross earnings. If you are either working more than 20 hours a week or earning more than $1,350 a month in gross earnings, Social Security will not evaluate your claim any further. They will stop there. They will say you are engaging in substantial gainful activity, and therefore, by our definition, you cannot be found disabled. If you are not engaging in substantial gainful activity, the Social Security Administration moves to step 2. They will look at your medical records and determine, do you have any severe medically determinable impairments? If you don't have any severe impairments, the evaluation of your case will stop there. Social Security will say you are not disabled according to our rules. If you have at least one severe medically determinable impairment, then the administration will move on to step 3 and evaluate that severe impairment and say, okay, do you meet or equal one of their listings in the Blue Book? We'll talk about the epilepsy listing in a minute. And if you do meet or equal a listing, the evaluation of your case stops there and you're approved. If you do not meet or equal one of the listings in the Blue Book, then instead of the case stopping, it goes to step 4. And at step 4, the Social Security Administration is going to give you a residual functional capacity, an RFC, and that is going to be based on the medical records. It's essentially what Social Security thinks you are capable of doing from a physical and mental standpoint based on the medical records. They will use that RFC, compare it to the past work you've done, and look, can an individual with this RFC return and do this type of work? If not, then they will move to step 5. If you can go back to your past work using the RFC that Social Security has given you, you will be found not disabled. Like I said, if you cannot go back to your past work, Social Security moves to step 5. They take a look at your RFC, your age, your education, and they say, okay, with all of that, can this individual go back to any other type of work that exists in the national economy? So not necessarily work that you've trained for, but any type of work. And if you can engage in other work, then you will get an ultimate denial. If there is no other work that you can do based on your RFC, age, education, then you will be found to be disabled at step 5. Okay, certain considerations with respect to epilepsy and Social Security. Epilepsy, if you're watching this and you've got epilepsy or you have a family member or friend who has it, you likely already know this. It's basically a pattern of recurrent and unprovoked seizures that are manifestations of abnormal electrical activity in the brain. There are various types of both generalized and focal or partial seizures. Social Security does not consider psychogenic or pseudo-seizures under the epilepsy listing. Instead, those are evaluated under listing section 12. We will not be talking about psychogenic or pseudo-seizures today. This is specifically talking about epilepsy. So just because, and again, if you've got epilepsy or you've got seizures, you likely already know this, but just because you have seizures does not mean you have epilepsy. So epilepsy, specifically the most common potentially disabling seizure types, according to Social Security, are generalized tonic-clonic seizures and dyscognitive seizures, which were also known as complex partial seizures. Social Security, in order to find you have epilepsy and seizures as a severe medically determinable impairment, they will need at least one detailed description of your seizures from someone else, preferably a medical professional, who has observed at least one of your typical seizures. If you have more than one type of seizures, Social Security will need a description of each type. It's not necessarily enough for your doctor to put in there, you have generalized tonic-clonic seizures, this is what we typically see. But instead, it needs to be a description of your specific seizures, how they manifest themselves in you. Everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people have differing seizures, different maybe precipitating signals or different things that happen afterwards, different things that happen during. So it's important to have a detailed description from somebody, again, preferably a medical professional who's witnessed one of your seizures. And if you have multiple types of seizures, make sure you have that description of each of those in the file. Social Security does not require EEG results. Therefore, they are not, if you don't have an EEG, they're not going to pay for one for you. But if you have had an EEG done and it's in the file, those results will be considered and evaluated in the context of all the other evidence in your case. An EEG is not going to make or break a case. It can help persuade Social Security how significant and severe the seizures are, but it is not going to be the determining factor. It's got to be in line with the rest of the medical evidence. As always, and as indicated before in the 5-step process, if you don't meet a listing, then Social Security will evaluate your residual functional capacity and determine whether or not you've got the RFC to engage in any type of substantial gainful activity. When it comes to counting seizures, when we get into the listing in a minute, you'll see that a certain number of seizures are required. When it comes to counting seizures, Social Security will not count seizures that happened before 1 month after you began prescribed treatment. So if you had seizures all 2021, you began prescribed treatment January 1st, 2022, Social Security will start counting seizures after you've been on the prescribed treatment for a month. Okay, the required number of seizures must occur within the period that Social Security is considering in connection with your application or your continuing disability review. If you had 4 seizures a month, you started treatment and you are no longer having any seizures, Social Security is going to look at that. Okay. When evaluating the frequency of your seizures, Social Security also considers your adherence to prescribed treatment. We'll talk about that again in a minute. When determining the number of seizures that you have in a specific period, the agency counts multiple seizures occurring over a 24-hour period as one seizure. So if you have 3 seizures in a 24-hour period, that's one seizure for the purposes of Social Security. A continuous series of seizures without a return to consciousness between them is also just one seizure. A dyscognitive seizure that will progress into a generalized tonic-clonic seizure, again, one generalized tonic-clonic seizure. Social Security does not count seizures that happen during a period that you are not adhering to prescribed treatment. Now, if you have good reason for not adhering to that prescribed treatment, then Social Security considers your physical, mental, educational, and communicative limitations. Some examples of good reason for not following prescribed treatment are if the treatment is risky for you due to particular consequences or its unusual nature, or if you can't afford prescribed treatment that you are ready, willing, and able to accept, but there are no free community resources available for you. So those are 2 kind of reasons that Social Security might consider to be good reason for not following that prescribed treatment. There might be others, but that is, and I can speak from experience, if you are not adhering to your prescribed treatment, Social Security is going to look at that and they're going to say, well, we don't know that you would continue to have seizures on this medication. You're not following the treatment that your doctor has given you. So, we're not going to find you to be disabled. So that's really, really important with respect to epilepsy claims, that you are following prescribed treatment. Again, as I mentioned before, psychogenic seizures and pseudo seizures are not considered epilepsy. They're not considered under this listing, and instead they're going to be evaluated under Section 12 of the Blue Book of Listings. Okay, here we are looking at the listing. There are 4 different potential avenues to meet listing 1102. This is 1102A, and it would require at least 1 generalized tonic-clonic seizure a month for 3 consecutive months, again, despite adherence to prescribed treatment. So you are following the prescribed treatment, but you are still having at least 1 generalized tonic-clonic seizure a month for a period of 3 months. Under 1102B, you can also meet the listing if you've got at least 1 dyscognitive seizure a week, at least 3 months, despite adherence to prescribed treatment. So if you're having at least 1 dyscognitive seizure a week for a period of 3 months, despite adherence to prescribed treatment, you might meet or equal listing 1102B. Looking at 1102C is going to require at least 1 generalized tonic-clonic seizure every 2 months for at least 4 consecutive months. So you've got to have at least 1 generalized tonic-clonic seizure every other month for a period of at least 4 months, despite adherence to prescribed treatment. Plus, in addition to that requirement of having at least 1 generalized tonic-clonic seizure every other month for 4 months, you have to have a marked limitation in one of the following: in your physical functioning, in your ability to understand, remember, or apply information, in your ability to interact with others, in your ability to concentrate, persist, or maintain pace, or in your ability to adapt or manage oneself. Okay, this is the last way you can meet this listing, is if you've got at least 1 dyscognitive seizure every 2 weeks for a period of at least 3 months, despite adherence to prescribed treatment. And then, similar to the last, also have a marked limitation in one of the following. Okay, so as you can see, there's 4 different avenues to meet or equal this listing. And if you've got to keep track of the seizures, you've got to have them documented, preferably in the medical record, because as you can see, that's really a big part of the epilepsy listings, is having a certain number of seizures in a certain amount of time. And then with C and D, you also have to have a marked limitation in an additional kind of sphere or domain of functioning. Certain considerations with respect to epilepsy, as is always the case with Social Security cases, medical records are important. The issue in Social Security disability cases is not just can you go back to your past work, not just can you go back and do work that you've been trained for, but can you perform any job that exists in the national economy? If you've watched my videos or webinars before, you know I call nurses out. I love nurses. My husband's in the medical field. We know how important nurses are. Nurses are highly trained, highly skilled individuals. Unfortunately, if you are in your 40s and a former nurse and you cannot go back to your past work, Social Security is going to look at, is there any other work you can do? Even once you hit 50, 55 with nurses, because you're highly skilled and highly trained, there are often transferable skills to other work. So nurses, you kind of get the short end of the stick with Social Security claims because they're not just looking at, can you go back to being a nurse? And many nurses, I'm sure not all, especially after the last 2 years, but many nurses love their work. They view it as a calling. They think it's really, they feel it's what they were meant to do and put on this earth to do. And so the idea of doing something other than what they've been trained to do, what they're skilled in doing, is not appealing. And I'm not picking on nurses. Lawyers were the same way. I've had lawyer clients that are like, well, I went to school for all these years and you're telling me that now I have to go, do a job that I maybe did many years ago and don't really want to go back to doing. Well, yeah, that's Social Security is going to look at that and not just see, can you go back to what you used to do, but are there any jobs that exist in the national economy that you can do? So that's really important. And that's where the medical records come in, especially with epilepsy. As you can see, having it documented what type, your specific description for your specific types of seizures, how often you're having them, what's happening before, during, and after. That's all very important for Social Security to understand. You have to remember, Social Security, they don't live with you. They don't know what you go through on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And somebody else could very well just come in and say, oh yeah, I've got epilepsy and this is what I've got going on. And so the more you can document your specific case and how the seizures specifically impact your ability to function, what your doctors are doing to try to get you back to a path of not having these seizures on a regular basis, that can all be helpful. As always, if you are 50 or older, and as I alluded to a minute ago, the grid rules might apply. And that's where your age, education, and past work all comes in to be evaluated with your RFC to determine, can you do any job that exists in the national economy? And that's where those transferable skills that I was talking about with nurses come in. Nurses are not the only ones with transferable skills. Other jobs do have them. They come from work that is skilled or semi-skilled. But where I'm located, we have a lot of hospitals. It's a medical hub. And so we do deal with nurses frequently. And functional capacity is also relevant, and objective medical records are important. The greater amount of objective medical evidence that you have that supports your claim for disability, the smoother your case will progress. All right, how can an attorney help you? So if you've watched my webinars before, I talk about this at the end of every webinar. We can help provide guidance on what correspondence from Social Security actually means. We cannot ever answer a question that's directed towards you, especially with respect to what you deal with on a daily basis, because we don't know. Excuse me. You can tell us until you're blue in the face what you deal with. We can understand. We can ask additional probing questions to get to the bottom of it, but we don't know what you deal with on a daily basis. So we provide guidance on what correspondence from them means. We provide guidance on what certain, testimony is being elicited. We provide guidance on what to expect. We cannot ever tell you what to do other than be honest. An attorney can file necessary appeals if you get to us in time or if we're already representing you. We review your medical records and your case file to discuss not only what's already in the file, but what might also be helpful in your specific case. Again, we don't answer questions for you, but we can review your documents for accuracy and completeness. We can discuss what Social Security is looking for in their requested forms. We work with you to provide relevant updates back and forth from you to Social Security to you throughout your claim, so that way everybody tries to be on the same page throughout the whole process. Additionally, if you have to go to hearing, we help prepare you for that hearing. We let you know what to expect. We talk about what types of questions might be asked. Again, we never give you the answer to the question, but we can ask additional questions and try to get you to understand the purpose behind the hearing. We are always upfront and honest with Social Security. We don't sugarcoat, we don't over exaggerate, but we want to make sure we're telling your story. We also question you and any witnesses, such as a medical witness or a vocational witness, during the hearing. All right, as promised, here is our phone number, our email address. Again, we can assist clients throughout the United States. Our main office is in Florida. We can help clients throughout the United States. If for some reason we can't help you, we do try to put you in touch with somebody local to you who can. So feel free to give us a call, send us an email. We will also go ahead and on live put a link in the chat to our scheduling page. If you have questions, go ahead and visit that. And on the replay, we will also include it in the description below. Thank you so much for joining us and watching. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Have a great day.